All right, welcome to I Know, a Solo Beatles video cast where we talk all things solo Beatles. I hope everybody's well. Um, Today we are interviewing the author, the co-author of Eight Arms to Hold You, Chip Madinger, co-author with Mark Easter. Welcome, Chip.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. How's the weather down there down in the south area today?
Well, if you don't like it, wait 15 minutes and it'll change. So, it's been wet and cool, and we're getting ready to start summer here. So,
Yeah, it was 85 degrees today in Vermont, so that was kind of nice.
that's saying something.
Yeah, but moving to our topic. First, I want to go back to the beginning. When did you kind of like get hardcore into the solo Beatles?
I'd have to say my first exposure that I remember was probably around 1971, and listening to WLS, which was an AM station out of Chicago. So being top 40, in 71 up through 73, there was plenty of solo Beatle content on the air. So I got my first tape recorder in that time, and I'd sit there with the microphone up to the radio to capture the Beatles stuff as it came across. And one thing I remember is specifically is trying to capture "Give Me Love" because it has such a cold start.
It does.
Yeah, you don't know it unless the DJ's gonna announce it in advance. So, so to answer your question, it's been quite a while.
And just out of curiosity, what is your favorite album by each of the four Beatles, solo-wise?
I might have some odd choices.
That's
I'm
okay.
Fond of Ringo's "Sentimental Journey."
I love that album too.
The arrangements on that are wonderful. George, everybody says all things must pass, but I tend to lean towards the George Harrison, the Green album.
Oh, I love that album.
Paul, it's a toss-up depending on what day of the week it is between "Back to the Egg" and "Ram." So I'm kind of in the late 70s, the 70s to late 70s period there. And for John, I think probably "Double Fantasy," just because I live that in real time.
Yeah, it's been that way for me. Did you pick up the half-speed master of Ram out of curiosity?
Yes, I did. I haven't had the opportunity to play it yet. There you go.
Yeah, beautiful sound. It really was. And you're obviously a completist. If you're listening to the audio version, I really want to just go in through Zoom and like just take all of your collectibles because that's not to scare you, but that's an impressive collection.
Thanks. You can't see the rest of it.
Oh, that's probably a good thing.
Probably.
And what's
but
your
I've
least?
Been at it a lot longer than you.
Yeah. And what's your least favorite by each of the four?
No. Well, I can't really speak to Ringo since I've purchased but haven't listened to anything he's released since Ringo Rama. So they're here, but they haven't been played. George, maybe the Dark Horse album.
Okay.
That was kind of rushed and the material was a little weak on it. Paul, Driving Rain, hands down.
You don't like that album at all? Oh.
And John, if you take the experimental albums out of the mix, Sometime in New York City is just such an easy target.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, there are very few highlights on that.
I mean, New York City, that opening guitar solo just is like, ooh, and I Love Woman is the N word of the world. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so moving back to the book, when did you and Mark get the idea to do this?
Well, starting about 1985, 86, I started writing for a magazine called The Legal Beatles, which was published by Doug Sulpy, who you may know. And we put together a guide to the solo Beatles outtakes in 1995 and sold through that. And I was kind of preparing an update, gathering new information, thinking of other things that I'd like to include in the book. And we just, Doug wanted to present one thing and I wanted to present another. So I took off on my own and started working for about a year and amassed quite an auto parts catalog of information. So in order to make it a little more readable, I brought on Mark Easter, who I'd known for quite some time, and he was as an avid a fan and as outspoken as I am about some of the work. So we were able to go through and critically assess the albums and basically call a spade. And, if something was great, we followed suit.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say, overall, we probably spent 2 years compiling everything and writing it up, but we'd spent our entire lifetimes gathering this information and collating this information. So maybe it was 20 years in gestation and a total of 3 years of writing.
And how many times do you think you've listened to all of the solo Beatles albums to like figure out the different mixes? And
well, we put together the discography so we knew we wouldn't miss anything.
Yeah.
And between our collections, we had copies of all of the US and all of the UK singles and all of the promotional singles. So we kind of went through methodically and made notes going along. There's a different mix here, there's an edit here. How do you recreate that edit if you don't actually have the single? I think the toughest thing, aside from listening to all of the Ringo audience tapes, was going through all of the Wings Over America shows and figuring out what city was the source of each song. Now, you have to remember this was in the days of cassettes and not MP3s that you could quickly scroll through or sync up. This was putting on the Wings Over America record, putting on the cassette, getting them to sync up. And no, it's not from there. So you check that one off and you go on to another city and see, does it sync up here? No, it doesn't. And, there were 23 shows on the tour. So it took quite some time to finally nail down what came from where.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. And I mean, doing this research without a computer, I mean, computers were very basic. I mean, you had to be connected to a phone router to get on the internet. I mean, what was the research process like for just every, kind of tracking, getting interviews and?
Well, the internet was there. It was still in the early AOL days. The book was published in 2000. The interviews, I'd find the musicians that had recorded with each of the solo Beatles through musician unions logs, and being young and adventurous, made a lot of cold calls and got several of the people to talk about their time and the work that they'd done with solo Beatles. They shared diaries, they shared recollections, and with that, we were able to put together a pretty respectable timeline, considering we weren't given access to any of EMI's records.
What were some of the things who were some of the people that stood out to you, really?
One interview was Hugh McCracken, who played with Paul on Ram.
And John on Double
with John
Fantasy.
on Happy Christmas and Double Fantasy. And I called up, and he was a cold call. I think it was day after Thanksgiving, maybe. And I don't do interviews. I don't do interviews. And there must have been something that, and when I told him what we were doing, that he gave us what was basically his first interview about his work with John and Paul. And he also worked with Ringo on Ringo, the fourth album.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And he worked with George in the, with Gary Wright in the Wonder Wheel days.
Yeah.
They did some recording then. So Hugh was cool. Another exciting one was Henry McCulloch.
Oh.
So I call up to Ireland, and it's the operators on there. Okay, I'm going to try and get a hold of him now, and he's on some farm up in Ireland. And finally, we talked for an hour or so, and then I got the phone bill, and it was $150 phone conversation.
Was it worth every penny?
Oh, it was neat to get a lot of information from him firsthand.
Yeah.
So that was exciting. Getting access to the Musicians Union records was exciting because for the first time we were able to say what all the songs were that were recorded during the Spectre sessions for rock and roll, and who all of the 27 musicians playing out of tune were on each of the songs. So that's in the book. So there were a lot of fun discoveries.
And did you ever do any like in-person interviews?
Did some in-person interviews. Talked to Lawrence Juber a couple times.
What was that setting like?
We were in a suite up at the Chicago Beatle Fest.
Oh.
And we had him up and sat down and talked 1 year, and then the next year we played a lot of bootlegs for him and asked him, did you play on this? Did you play on this? What's the story behind this song? So he was quite helpful. Alan Parsons was great. So, he was able to talk. We talked to him for hours about, not only the Beatles angle, but all the Pink Floyd work and everything he'd done as a solo artist, and found out that Paul had solicited him in the late 80s to work as a co-collaborator, after or before Flowers in the Dirt.
Wow.
And it never came to be, but that was interesting to discover.
I didn't know that.
Who else did we do in person? Jim Horn, who played on several of George's albums and at the concert for Bangladesh. And since the book came out for the first time over 20 years ago, I can't remember a lot of those details.
But wow, I mean, just being there, like sitting in a hotel room with Lawrence Juber is like, I couldn't control myself sitting on a Zoom call with him.
Denny Sywell was helpful.
Oh, Denny's wonderful.
And this was back in the days before he was as affable as he is now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else. They're all listed in there. Thaddeus Richard, who was one of Paul's members of Paul's horn section. I called him up, and it was basically, this is not a good time. So we didn't get to talk to Thaddeus very long.
But yeah, but like going with the album covers, how did that with the book cover?
The artwork for the book cover?
Yes.
Should we show everybody what you're talking about?
Yes, I can't. I'll edit an image there.
There we go.
Oh, that's
a well-worn and marked up copy.
Yeah.
What we did was we basically would get a stack of albums, 2 or 3 inches worth of them and hold them on the scanner. And we'd scan through. Then we'd put another stack together, scan through them, and then once we got our, 18 inches of albums together, we stitched all the individual pieces together. And then we went into Photoshop and took all the catalog numbers off and kind of arranged the name of the album so they all kind of came into play at the same level. So that was a lot of fun.
I mean, and like just this sheer fact of writing all of this, like the process you said started in 1985. When you were working on this, did you go from like John to Paul to George from Ringo like the book was, or was it all scrambled?
It was all over the place. It was, we had the framework for everything, and we had a big Word document for each one of them. And as we got new information, we put it in. We highlighted everything, and then as we went through and were happy with the text, we took the highlighting off. So once we got to a document without any highlighting on it, we knew we were done.
And what is the difference in between the I know it's a lot very different from what I've read once upon a long ago, no pun intended, when I read the original. I don't have that anymore, unfortunately, with the libraries, but what is the difference, and how did
between that and the electronic version?
Yes.
Okay. The electronic version came about in 2018. I think.
Wow.
And what had happened is, 8 Arms had sold through and was starting to command 3-figure sums on the internet.
Yeah.
And Mark and I wanted to have our work available and in print. So what we did is we went through it and kind of if we knew then what we know now attitude, fixed corrections, added a lot of session information. We didn't update anything in regards to things that had recently had become available on bootleg post 2000, but we did kind of beef up the book, and I think there were close to 40,000 new words added to the remastered E version. So that's going to be available forever as a PDF that you can get at Lenanology.com.
And what I learned reading this is like with the group, like there's so many different mixes, like the Horzu Magical Mystery Tour has like, I can't think of it, like a different mix of Blue Jay Way or something, but like with his solo years, it's just as confusing as the Beatles.
It really is. They were flying tapes all over the world, and somebody'd get a mix that hadn't been completed, and they didn't know any better, and they went ahead and they cut it as their single. For example, Mary Had a Little Lamb. There are 2 different versions of that between the UK version and the rest of the world, and the one that got released in Germany.
Wow. So, what's the exact difference, if you don't mind me asking, if you know off the top of your head?
That's one of those that I don't listen to very often, but
if I remember
correctly, it was, I think that his kids were well up in the mix.
Okay.
So you could hear their contributions.
Yeah, that seems about right. And I mean, what was like the biggest discovery that you found doing this?
It was sourcing the Wings Over America tracks and finding out all the information about the rock and roll album.
That was like the holy grail for you.
That was it.
Were there some stuff that really disappointed you finding out about all of them?
It was kind of disappointing in some aspects when we couldn't find out something about a project.
What was
For
that like?
example, like Ringo's Bad Boy album. We looked and we looked and we were only able to find a couple of overdub dates in Los Angeles, but we weren't able to find out when the album was actually recorded and on what dates.
Wow.
So, there's situations like a lot of George's material after he moved into Friar Park, he wasn't working in different studios. The tapes got copied and passed around. He had complete control over his vault. And for that reason, we really don't have access to a lot of the information for George's solo work after 1974. Unless it came from the I Me Mine books or some other correspondence.
Yeah. Going back to the like with the song Love from John, the commercial version, like, because you label them like A1, A2, like with the alternate take, like, did you find any alternate takes that you preferred over the original?
The numbering in the book was difficult because at the time we didn't know how many takes of the song there were, so we couldn't necessarily put them in chronological order. So, for example, an A1 would be the commercial version. And with Love, there's the fade in and the fade out that you really couldn't, as John said, you can't hear it on the radio. So when they decided to put that out as a single in 1982, they remixed it and brought the intro up so that it sounded like a proper piano part. And it was interesting that mix did not show up on the new box set.
Yeah, that was interesting. Now that I think of that, did you buy the new box set?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
What'd you think?
I didn't buy it yet. I'm going to wait until it comes down on price, but the listening that I did on Spotify I liked it a lot.
They did a great job with it. Don't wait too long.
Yeah, I won't. Not like, because like I was looking and half the Beatles catalog is out of print on vinyl now.
Yeah.
Like all those stereo remasters, this is crazy. And like the George Harrison box set, like Brainwashed and Live in Japan, are so hard to find now. It's crazy.
They were really tough before the box came out.
Yeah.
And now they're tough again. I mean, what the live album, I had the opportunity, I was living on the East Coast at the time, where there are a lot of record stores compared to the Midwest.
Yeah.
In Boston and in Baltimore and DC. So I was able to find a lot of those albums when they came out and, got in the habit, all right, even though I'm not going to be playing any vinyl, I'm going to pick up, the Paul album. So I got all of as they came out, the Twin Freaks and the Fireman albums and all those things.
Do you have the Rush's album on vinyl, that Fireman one?
Yes.
Oh, that one's like even like 300. It's like $300 just to get the CD. It's crazy.
Yep.
But yeah, moving on to Look at Me. I didn't recall this. But I didn't realize that was a White Album outtake. And
I don't know that it was necessarily an outtake because, as we know, it was never formally recorded as part of the White Album sessions. But John did say that was written around the White Album period. So it did not come from the therapy sessions with the Janovs, but it predated those.
Interesting. But like, what was the most, like with Ringo, like Old Wave, which is a very scarce album to come by anyways. Like, how was the, like, with all those different outtakes? And I mean, that's, you can't even find that on
Um,
CD.
Matt Hurwitz, who used to run a fan magazine called, oh, I'm drawing a blank. I should really know what that is. But he did an excellent job of sleuthing out a lot of the Ringo data. And as a result, he was, I think, the producer of the reissues of Old Wave and Stop and Smell the Roses when they came out on CD for the first time in 1994.
Oh wow.
So we have him to thank for turning up those few outtakes that we have. There's still a couple from Old Wave that are still lacking, but
And so the book ends in 2000. Is there a possible revision to go from 2000 to present day?
I'd have to say no, because I don't have it in me to listen to all of the All-Star Band tapes since 2000, much less all of the McCartney live tapes since 2000, because with Paul, you get the set list and it would be like Cats. It'd be like you get the same performance, same pattern, same everything every night, because it was all scripted and it had to go with the films and the
Yeah.
lighting and the like. He couldn't be as spontaneous as he could back on the Wing 72 tour, where it was just some lights and all right, well, let's do 20 Fly Rock tonight. And so to get back to your question, I don't think I've got it in me to go back, much less amass all of those tapes to go through and listen and to compare all the different versions, because nowadays everybody's got an iPhone that they're holding up at the shows. So you have hundreds of different clips from iPhones. You have a lot of different people recording the shows now because the equipment is much less conspicuous, and you could get a much better recording nowadays than you could. So there are going to be a lot of different recordings available. So there's just too much out there, I think, to parse through to that would warrant another edition.
Yeah, you'd have to listen to all those Ringo albums. So exciting, right?
Right. But they're very short.
No, yeah, it's crazy. What made you stop at Ringo Rama?
There was just nothing that I found interesting enough, I don't think, to keep listening to. I mean, I wasn't writing for anything. I wasn't writing about Ringo for anything at the time. So there was really no reason why I had to listen to it.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
What was, like, with all the Paul stuff, like finding all the demos of all the unreleased stuff, like, was that like mostly bootlegs, or would you just find the tapes? And
I'd say the majority of it was probably bootlegs. There are several things that are listed in the book as unbootlegged. We heard everything that's listed in the book. So if something's listed as unbootlegged in there, that's something that was on a piece of tape that we were able to hear that hadn't made it onto bootleg yet. But you also have to remember that in 2000 was CDRs were still kind of in their infancy.
yeah, true.
Now nowadays everybody's a bootleg producer. They're tweaking their tapes and making their own CDs, and there's there's just too much stuff to try and boil down into a something that's usable. I mean, how do you tell somebody, well, you need to find the CDR that was made by, Fubar 2000 on on dime a dozen, or you need to go find such and such as remaster that's on Bootleg Zone. But make sure you get the revised version of it, and it's just uh, there's just so much nowadays. It just wouldn't be useful.
As a collector, what's the most unique or rare thing that you own?
I can't tell you that. There are several things here that are very cool. Some neat autographs and the like. Um, but I'd have to say probably the neatest things I have are some of the gold records and a poster signed by John and Yoko at Yoko's "This Is Not Here" exhibition in 1971.
Wow, personally signed or?
For me, no. The only personalized ones I have are from Paul.
When did you get that signed?
The Paul?
Yes.
Linda was producing a line of vegetarian TV dinners in 1994, and they held press conferences in 4 different cities, and St. Louis happened to be one of them. So I wrangled up some press passes and was able to bring Mark Easter in as my cameraman. And we both sat as Linda gave her press conference, and halfway through, Paul came in. And at the end of it, they talked to everyone and signed autographs, and it was a great day.
Yeah, I mean, sitting in a room with Paul and his wife, I think that would be considered a pretty good day.
Yes.
But I just still can't believe how knowledgeable this book is, and it is by far the best piece of reference material and is the pioneer of solo Beatle books. Like, I know, like, there's a lot of reference Beatle books, but in the solo years, it's very skim. Like in most McCartney biographies, it's he did the Beatles and that he had his solo career. He had 2 hits with Wings.
Pages, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and which is really unfortunate. And in many ways, the solo careers are so overlooked by each of the Beatles in many aspects. But
Well, if you do the math on the book, it's really a history of 100 years of music, 30 from George, Ringo, and Paul between 1970 and 2000, and 10 for John.
right.
So there's a lot packed in there, and we're very proud of it. And there are copies of it at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in their library. And I know that George had a copy in his archive.
Oh, he did.
They used to help organize his materials. Copies were sent to Paul, Ringo, and John as well, or Yoko. And I know Yoko's staff has a copy. So it's holding its own.
And you did appear in the credits of the Plastic Ono Band box set for your Lennon book, Lennonology. Yes. Do you want to? What was your reaction when you realized you were in there?
To step back a little bit, the last Lennon release before that was the "Give Me Some Truth" compilation.
Yeah.
That came out, and we were listed in there as well. Lennonology was listed in there, so that was a real surprise. And then to see it show up again in the Plastic Ono Band book, right next to the Beatles anthology, that was quite a thrill.
Wow. And I know you were also listed in the credits of the Capitol album reissues, I believe.
Yes. Wow. I provided the record sleeves and the photography for that.
Wow. And that was what, 2008?
I don't recall, because there was that one, and then there were the credits for the Magical Mystery Tour Blu-ray package.
Wow.
So I've hit on several of them. The Family Way reissue, which we're working on another version, but we're having some difficulties locating tapes with COVID. There aren't people going into the vaults and pulling things and running things off right now. So maybe as time progresses here, we'll get to see. We've got a deluxe version of the Family Way that we're putting together.
Wow.
So lots of neat projects.
But I want to thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
I'm going to let you plug your books.
Oh, all right. I did a little bit.
Yeah.
8 Arms to Hold You. The physical copy is no longer available, but there, as we spoke of, there's an updated ebook version that's available at lennonology.com as a download. And then there is the Lennonology Strange Days Indeed book, which is a history of John and Yoko's life together from 1968 through 1980. It's a day-by-day chronicle. And I've got a handful of hardbacks left and plenty of paperbacks. But this is only available as a physical book right now. There is no e-version of it at this time. So I appreciate your letting me come on.
Yeah. And that is another episode.